So today's guest is my good friend Jake. So I love his story for so many reasons. So I think that we've talked a lot about in this class how like you're gonna have the ups and downs of your career, right? How a lot of you are still like, you're like, this is what I'm doing, and a lot of you are like, wait, I don't know what I'm gonna do anymore. And a lot of you are like very unsure. So I love Jake's story because basically he got his degree, did all the traditional stuff, kind of went off, did hospitality land for a while, realized it was like not the love of his life, and then went a totally different direction. So I think we have an extra cool opportunity today because your peer, Max, will actually be interviewing Jake, so it's not going to be me. So hopefully Max has been paying attention this semester of how to
Of course, of course I have been.
So I am actually going to peace out because I have to go to another meeting per usual, but I know Max is going to do awesome. Lake Bell's in charge per usual, and I think you're going to have a lot of fun getting to know Jake. I know I certainly have. He's like an inspiration in my life in a lot of ways. I think he's the coolest dude ever. So next to my husband. He's the coolest dude. You're the second coolest.
Nice save.
Yeah. So I'm excited for y'all to get to know him. Make sure you ask a lot of questions, and no class next week. No class during study week. See you for finals. If you have questions, hit me up. Other things before I leave. You all are amazing. Also, I saw like half of your site supervisors on Wednesday, and I had so much fun talking about all of you. You're amazing, and they love you all. So, not all of you. Most of you they really like. So, all right, cool. Floor is yours, my friend.
Alrighty. Hello, everyone. My name is Max, and we have Jake. I mean, Jen already kind of did the introduction.
Not a good one.
Okay. Well, she knows it better than I do, so we'll say that was the introduction. So
easy.
I guess you run a podcast called The Guest List. So can you just, I guess, elaborate more on what exactly that is?
Yeah. So it kind of just speaks to like the ethos of Vegas. What a lot of people have kind of called it is just a Joe Rogan Vegas. It's long form conversations with entrepreneurs, creators, leaders, pretty much anybody in the city that is pushing the city forward or kind of going against the grain and building something new and constructive. So I started the podcast about 2 weeks after the shutdown. I had worked in the nightclub scene. I was working at Omnia nightclub for the last 5 years as a busser. And I always wanted to start a podcast, looked up to people like Joe Rogan, Tim Ferriss, Lex Friedman, all of the top podcasters in the world. And being a born and raised Vegas native here, I realized that there was much more than the Strip. And a lot of the existing podcasts and media channels all just talk about the Strip and what goes on there. And as somebody who's from here, and for most locals, we don't oftentimes go to the Strip unless we're going to the club or the pool or something like that. And so I really just wanted to commemorate those who are pushing the city forward. And so now, as of the time of today, we've done probably about 200 episodes in a year and a half, just going from entrepreneurs, casino owners, politicians, business owners, content creators, and so forth. And now I've started a second podcast called Crypto Natives, and I run a crypto company out here called Native Research. And so that's also gone into its own direction as well, but they're all under the same roof.
Alrighty. And then I guess with that podcast, kind of, I guess, what's like the day in, day out type of deal with it?
It's a lot of work, especially at first because I literally knew nothing. I learned everything off of YouTube, as probably most people do nowadays, right? YouTube University. It's a grind, man. So I was doing 2 episodes per week. Still kind of do at the time. It starts with reaching out to people on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook groups, Twitter DMs, Instagram DMs, reaching out to your friend network, trying to find like who's actually building in the city.
Yeah.
Now it's a little bit different because the show has some stature, so people are reaching out to me.
Yeah.
But it took a long while to figure it out. You record. Well, first, I literally record everything in like a 400 square foot studio that I live in. So it's kind of funny when you have like billionaires walk into your apartment and your bed is literally 5 feet away from the table that you're recording on. But I've learned that most people really don't care. It might not be professional per se, but a lot of these people, they just want to share their story.
Yeah.
And so you record the audio, you record the video, and then there's an editing process to it, and that actually takes much longer than the conversation itself. I would say for about an hour or two. I usually record between an hour to two per episode. It takes about twice as long as that for the editing process and posting on social media, engaging with the community, sending the guests the content to post, which is a pain within itself. And so it's really a grind, but now I have an intern actually from UNLV that works on the video editing process, so now I can put more focus into the curation and the conversation.
Yeah.
The first 10 episodes or so, I actually had pre-written questions, and now I don't. I literally just go in blind because I think it's more of an authentic and organic conversation than sounding like a robot or traditional media where they're just reading off of bullet points and you get more of like a robotic response.
Yeah, that makes sense. So now I guess I'm just kind of interested on like starting out, like, because I know you said you watch like YouTube and whatnot, but like getting those first guests and like, I mean, if you're going to a podcast, you basically have no like insurance, you know, like you're just kind of, it's risking it all almost, I feel like.
It's, yeah, you're going, you're putting yourself out there and you're being vulnerable. If you go to my first ever episode 0, I sound like a robot. I sound very monotone, very nervous on screen. I'd never done anything in content creation my entire life. For a long time, I was actually very resistant to it. I used to call it a cop-out for a lot of people. I just didn't really understand it until I got myself into it. And so it's kind of like this idea of learning in public, which is kind of where the trend is going with the creator economy and remote working and the digital economy and everything of that nature. So it is very nerve-wracking, but you just got to know that those people who support you, they want to be on your journey. They want to see you grow over time. Yeah. And it is nerve-wracking, and you feel a sense of imposter syndrome, like, why am I doing this? This only has 5 views, 5 listens. Who would ever listen to this? But you have to learn that you're doing it for yourself at the end of the day. Podcasting is probably one of the best social leverage tools that exists. When I'd reach out, before I had a podcast, I'd reach out to high net worth individuals or people who have some status, and they wouldn't respond. But then I'd say, hey, do you want to come on my podcast? And they would say, how much time do you need? Yeah. And to me, it felt like a life hack. And now it kind of just gradually is built on each other. But my first 2 episodes were actually nurses. I kind of like figured out what the trend was, right? So I started the podcast 2 weeks after the Strip was shut down. It was a very scary time for Vegas. No one knew what was going on. I reached out to 2 of my friends who were nurses. And so I put out, and so then just interviewed their experience with COVID. One of the nurses actually had the first COVID patient in Vegas, and so there was a lot of information there, and that got a lot of traction. And then just started reaching out to my network of people who are doing cool things.
Okay.
And you don't have to go for like the high-level guests in the beginning. Interview people that you feel comfortable with, people that maybe you are familiar with, that you've known for a long time, that maybe has some sort of success or whatever the direction is of the podcast that you want to take. And then just go with it, man. It's a fun time. It's a fun, cool experience, and you're not going to figure out right away. Even a year and a half into this, I still don't even think I've figured it out completely. Yeah. And from some of my friends that have been doing podcasts for 5+ years, they still don't think that they figured it out. It's the same thing of like growing up into adulthood. Most adults still don't have life figured out, even until they're on their deathbed. And it's the same thing with podcasting, and you can take it many different directions, whether you're interviewing somebody or you do a solo show or a co-hosted show on a wide variety of topics. But the best thing is to kind of niche down and just find something that's very specific and specialized and be a leader in that community and then grow from there.
Okay. I like that, like, starting small and kind of branching out and whatnot. So I guess why did you focus on Las Vegas, kind of locals in the area and like important people and whatnot? Like, why was that the topic that you decided to focus on?
I'm very bullish on Vegas, and yeah, that's a financial term. I just think that Vegas is going to continually grow. I worked on the Strip for 10 years, from 18 to 28. Worked as a lifeguard, worked as a cabana host, busser, and I used to always get this like phrase that people would say is like, Vegas is going to be the next LA. And obviously Vegas has its own specific market, where LA has film, Vegas has partying, and all the different derivatives that exist there. And so I thought, if Vegas is only going to continue to grow, I should be the person that everyone goes to talk. Vegas has 2.5 million residents, but we also have 40 million secondary residents who visit here every year. So I thought, okay, I have pretty much a limitless amount of opportunity. I literally can interview pretty much anybody. Everyone comes to Vegas. Everyone's very captured by the city. Everyone has a cool Vegas story, whether it's good or bad, is to be determined. And then Vegas it's been dependent on hospitality for a long time. We saw this with the COVID pandemic, where the Strip shut down and Vegas had the highest unemployment rate of I think it was like 31% almost. But I did notice from all of my different entrepreneurial things that I've done before the podcast that there are like these sub-markets and sub-niches of industry that are growing out here in Vegas. And so I wanted to tap into all of those in this like very siloed city where a lot of these industries, whether you're in the film industry or adult film or crypto or tech or whatever, these communities never spoke with each other. And so there was like a massive gap. And podcasters are becoming modern day media companies. And you see this happen with all kinds of different podcasts where they begin posting second shows or third shows under their feed, which is kind of what I'm doing as well. And now you even see things like Mark Zuckerberg, when he's doing interviews, he doesn't go to traditional media, he goes to podcasts. And it's because it's he sees where the future is with this creator economy. And this is like kind of loose ideas that I had, and then it just became more formidable once I got some traction with the show, and then just understand where the direction is of the city. And it's just a massive networking tool. I like to call it a social investor, where you interview somebody, right? Whether they're at the beginning of their journey, middle, end, whatever. You're expanding what I call social capital. In return, you get social equity, and then sometime in the future, that person that's on your show redeems it for you in the form of a business opportunity, a lunch, dinner, investment, whatever, social support, engagement, so on. And so you just continually build that way. And what I mean by social capital is that you're pretty much giving them a stage, which most guests that I've had have never been on a podcast before. So it's a unique experience to them. And most of the time when you go through a first-time experience, you're probably going to remember that forever. And a lot of people really feel that they have some sort of value to the community or whatever that they're doing. And so you're just giving them opportunity, and then sometime down the road, and for the majority of like the social equity that I've been redeemed, it's usually some sort of guest that ends up coming on the podcast where they kind of level up onto this like social hierarchy.
Okay. When you were saying like Vegas is like an untapped market, I really agree with that, because I've basically grown up here since first grade, and it's just crazy to see how this city's developed, Like, at first it was just like live here, but then you think like the Raiders coming over here, like having a sports team, you see all the development and everything. I really like agree with that it is developing. And with that being said, I was just wondering, what was your kind of journey in Vegas?
It's been a crazy journey. So born and raised here, grew up on the east side of Vegas. For those that don't know, it's a like lower middle class area. Graduated from Chaparral High School. Came on to UNLV and only had maybe 3 or 4 friends from Chap even make it to UNLV. Chap was under 60% graduation rate every year that I was there. And so a lot of people end up just going to work wage jobs. Came here, majored in kinesiology, joined AE Pi fraternity, which is the Jewish fraternity on campus. Had an awesome college experience, lived in the fraternity house, very engaged with campus life, whether it's football games, basketball games, other organizations, philanthropy, so on and so forth. But about my third year in college, I realized that I wasn't going to use kinesiology practically, and professionally. But I did know that I was going to use it practically. You use health sciences every day in your life, whether it's for nutrition, for working out, exercise, diet, anything of that nature. But I did realize that Vegas is built on networking. I like to call it's like the name drop economy or the instant gratification town. It's all tip based. So in order to get a tip, you have to perform a service for somebody. And so I realized that while I was working on the Strip as a lifeguard at Planet Hollywood and being in a fraternity, these kind of 2 different dynamics like interacted with each other a lot. A lot of the people that were in the fraternity ended up working on the Strip, and then the people who were working on the strip were making capital and getting investments and so forth. And so I just utilized that experience. One of my goals when I was on campus was actually to meet one new person every day in the student union, because fraternities hang out at those high tables. I don't know if they still do or not, but that was the trend back in the day. And so after I graduated, took the traditional UNLV 5-year plan, as most people typically do. I was working 40 hours a week my entire college experience. I got hired at Omnia nightclub right when it opened. I was very fortunate, applied for it. A lot of applicants there. So while I was working at the nightclub, started accruing some capital, saving up. Started my first business in 2017 called Next Gen Pickers, which was an antique store and collectible store. Very random, I know, but growing up, my father would engage with things like Storage Wars and American Pickers and yard sales and liquidations and all these things. And so I thought, it would be a cool business is to open up business for my father. And so it wasn't financially successful, but I learned a lot along the way. And that same year, I co-founded an app with one of my friends called Chameleon Verified Network, which the basic idea was to fight ticket fraud. We'd been scammed through EDC tickets and all this so many times. We're like, hey, let's create an app that verifies that the ticket is authentic. That ultimately ended up closing up as well. Learned a lot of experiences through that. And then the big kicker is I got involved in cryptocurrency in 2017. Early 2017, was turned on to the pseudonym of Satoshi Nakamoto and the whole story and self-sovereignty, and we can get into that.
Yeah, we'll get into that later.
We'll get into it. It's a very dense topic. And so just started investing, had no financial background at all. And it was just something that I had such high conviction in after learning about it, and got into that. And while I was working at the nightclub, got sucked up by Vegas. It was a very unfortunate situation. Started going out drinking, substance abuse, spending a lot of money, all kinds, just making very, very bad decisions. Ended up going sober for 3 years to try to get my life together. And so from, I think it was 2018 up until earlier this year, really just head down, grinding, trying to save money, build a business, all these different things. And then once the strip closed down, and then at the same time, the crypto markets and everything else just absolutely tanked. And I was like, all right, now I have $10 to my name. I got to figure out how I'm going to rebuild from here. Because I didn't, when the strip shut down, a lot of my coworkers were like, oh, we'll be open in a few months. And I was like, this is going to last.
A year.
This is
over a year. Yeah.
I was like, this is going to last a long time, so I need to do it. And I had this do or die moment where I was like, if I'm ever going to start a podcast, it's literally right now when I'm sitting here just...
Oh, so it was spur of the moment. It wasn't you weren't planning on...
I had always wanted to do a podcast. It'd been on the back of my mind for 2 years or so.
Yeah.
Just never really had the time.
This is kind of the fire that lit under you.
Yeah, I just never had the time to dedicate to it. And
they had all the time.
Had all the time and sitting there watching politics, and I was like, dude, this is driving me crazy. Just sitting here watching Trump just ramble and ramble. And so, started the podcast and just built it from there. And now it's grown into meeting all these cool people across the city and networking, and new opportunities just literally present themselves every day. And that's how I guess I end up here.
Okay. So I guess I wanted to first then touch on college because, you said you didn't really use your degree. So do you still find that the college experience was still valuable for you?
Absolutely, yeah. I've said this multiple times on my show that college was the best social experience that I could ever have. It was my social awakening, per se. I was always a social person in high school, but being around the network that college presents itself, people from so many different backgrounds, families, status, interests, so on and so forth, it really helped me just find my ground of who I was going to be in my future. And I don't think it's something you can replicate anywhere else.
Yeah.
I know with college, it gets a lot of bad rap for, overpricing, and maybe the education isn't as informed as they portray it to be, but the network doesn't exist anywhere else. And I know colleges and university are moving to this remote model, which is unfortunate because it's really just going to destroy campus life and the football games and everything that comes with it. But I highly advise to go to college, at least for a few years to get that social experience, unless you pursue entrepreneurship, which you don't need a college degree to do. but having that social experience will set you up for a lot of success in the entrepreneurial world. And it's never too late to start. You could do any age. Just I highly advise to not go into massive debt if that's your college experience, unless you're moving into like the hard sciences of like chemistry and physics and health and things like that. But a lot of the other, I forget what they call it, like the dynamic education, like economics and things like, and even like liberal arts and things like that, it can be learned, but it all depends on what you're doing. But with liberal arts, it's a good spot to be in because we're moving into this like creator economy where everything's digitized. We're all our own walking brands at the end of the day. We all have social media accounts, right? We're all posting on stories and Twitter and all these different things, TikTok. And so liberal arts and creativity is going to be in a high amount of demand as a lot of the mundane positions and jobs get automated away by robots, AI, and machine learning, and so on and so forth. And so there's a lot of creativity demand, and that's what liberal arts is.
Alrighty. Trying to think.
I have a question.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Please.
I don't know if you already mentioned this, so sorry about that. But how often do you produce? Well, okay, 2 questions. So how often do you produce your episodes for your podcast? And do you find that as a content creator, do you have burnout?
Yeah, so I was doing 2 per week. Now it's gone down to, so I was doing, we'll classify it this way. I was doing 8 per month. Now I'm doing about 6 per month because of that burnout, but also because of new opportunities that have presented themselves that needs a little bit more attention. But I'll never get rid of it. And burnout does come, yeah. So I reached it recently, and I put an episode out a few months ago that I said, the final quarter of this year, I'm going to cut it down to maybe 4 to 6 per month instead of 8, because it becomes very tiresome, and especially if you don't have a team. And I'm trying to scale to get a team, and obviously that requires capital. And so you have the intern. That's kind of like the intermediary to build that. But you do receive a lot of burnout and becomes tiresome, especially if you're not compensated and you're just doing it for like that social advance. It's something that hinders a lot of people a lot, and so you have to just continually do it. But more importantly, you have to build a team around you. There's not one successful social media influencer, content creator that doesn't have a big team behind them.
So are you basically a one-man band right now, besides the intern?
So yeah, not anybody that's officially been hired. Not anyone that's been officially hired, but I've been working with a content team that's been helping me, and you can see some of the videos on my channel that kind of capture the events that I go to and kind of moving into this like influencer or leadership role per se. So I have received a lot of help from people just reaching out and saying, hey, how can I help you? Like, I have this friend, like he should be on your podcast. So that, the mental capacity it takes to first find guests, and then you have to like socially vet them as well. That help has helped like an insurmountable amount, where now I don't even really reach out to people. I just get recommendations from PR agencies, people like Jenna sending me people, and then you get onto these different committees, and then people just kind of find you. But in the beginning, finding guests and vetting them was probably the most constraining, but now that's been lifted just because of the community that forms around you. And
networking pays off.
It really does. Yeah.
Really?
And there's definitely points where even 4 or 5 months into the podcasting journey, I would question what I was doing or when the help would come at some point. But some days you just wake up and there's just new opportunities present themselves or new people come into your life. And now, it's weird because now probably 95% of the people I interact with I've met over the last 1.5 years since starting the podcast. And so that, like, moving into that new lifestyle has been a dramatic change and still adjusting to it. But it's just a cool opportunity where you get to just wake up and know that you could wake up with a text that could completely just change your life. So very, very rewarding, and that kind of like staves off some of the burnout because you know that day is going to come. You just don't know in what form or when.
very interesting that you said, 90% you just met, because not a lot of people can say that during the pandemic. Like, there's a lot of isolation happening, and quite the opposite. So.
It is, yeah. A lot. What I learned during the pandemic is there was a lot of people who had a very similar idea that I did, that right now is the time to basically pursue anything that you have interest of, because we're all kind of just sitting around, and society's going to go through this massive transformation that's been kind of accelerated. And that kind of idea is portrayed on my podcast all the time. I'd say every few guests, somebody talks about how whatever they're doing now, they built during COVID and during the lockdowns, and those kind of ideas. And so, yeah, it's just a big idea. It feels very isolated, but there's a lot of people in society, at least in Vegas, that have been forming around the same idea. And so that's kind of like what I was talking about. Like, Vegas is very siloed, where a lot of these different industries don't really communicate with each other. Maybe that's because the hospitality industry is so big, it kind of just like sucks up everyone's attention. But we're all on the same page. And even going a little bit deeper into the NFT community that I'm a part of here, we're trying to turn Vegas into an NFT hub. And we've found that about 500 people that are in this community, everyone came to the same conclusion in the last 6 months. Again, just like trying to bring everyone together. So a lot of people in Vegas, we're all on the same page. It's just putting us all here in the same room to talk about it.
Thank you. I don't know if anybody else has questions, otherwise.
Yeah, if you have any questions at any point, just raise your hand or anything like that.
Do you feel like your speaking skills have developed due to like the networking that you're talking about, or do you do any practices to help your speaking skills?
When I first started the podcast, before even recording, I bought like a $40 mic off of Amazon, plugged it into my computer, and I would just ramble into the microphone just anything that came to mind, almost like writing, where if you're trying to write something, you just type even if there's grammatical errors or not. And so I would practice that until I could get to 20 minutes straight with just rambling off of whatever's coming to my mind, regardless if the content was good or not. And then I started recording, and I felt confident, and then you start recording from the camera, and you're like, oh wait, now I'm back to zero. But my conversational skills have improved dramatically, and not just in like an interview sense, but just a conversational sense. And what I've learned is that charisma and conviction go hand in hand, and confidence, I guess you call them the 3 C's. And that's kind of like what are a lot of strengths for leaders. And if you look at like one of the best charismatic speakers ever is Barack Obama. That's how he became president. He just has such a command of whatever he's presenting and his ideas and confidence. And it comes just through practice. And there's no way to get to it. You kind of just have to like get over that vulnerability hump that I'm putting myself out here. Yes, I suck. They may talk shit or whatever the case is. But over time, people eventually cave in. And it was weird because on social media, I'd always been just like the party guy. I was the party guy in college, worked at a nightclub, just always around the partying. And so once I pivoted and started talking about podcasts and all these things, I actually lost like a bunch of followers because people are just like not used to whatever you're doing. And they're like, what? I don't want to follow this podcast. Like, what are you doing? Like, you suck, you're terrible. But they all eventually came back, and now they all message me consistently asking about how to start a podcast and crypto and all these things. And so you will lose some followers, whatever you're doing. But that was my fear for a long time. And then once they came, it was a fear that I was going to lose all my followers. But then after I lost them, I was like, I don't even need them anyways. Like, why was I so fearful for that? Yeah. And now they're all talking about like charismatic skills, and it was because of the practice of going through these conversations. I could understand the thinking of what goes behind everything, and to form relationships. So yeah, it's improved drastically. And I tell people, even if you don't get any downloads, which you should never look at the downloads, just do it for your own personal experience, and you'll see a lot of improvements in life outside of just your speaking skills.
Was there a thing with like a speaking habit that you had that when you were like producing your stuff, you'd be like, I need to stop saying that, I need to stop doing that? Or did you have like a specific phrase you would use?
Yeah, I used to say like tight and and yeah. A lot of the boomer words, I guess, the boomer slang words.
Don't remind me.
Yeah. What I actually did before I started the podcast is I went back through Joe Rogan's first episodes. I watched like the first 10 all the way through, and then kind of like just gradually went all the way through. Probably watched like close to 100 different episodes. And I marked down how many times he used filler words, like and, so, and just different like extensions of words, like saying and then trying to like use it as like a filler. Right. And I noticed that he was also very terrible in the beginning as well, and that he dramatically improves over time. And I did the same thing with Tim Ferriss and Lex Friedman and some of these other great podcasters. And so I knew everyone goes through like these same trials. And so you just kind of learn through watching and listening to your own podcasts. It's called like self-modeling, which is maybe one thing that I learned through UNLV, is that it's really important to watch yourself and to listen to yourself to understand like where your issues are. A lot of people don't like to self-model because they are very they're very neglectful of their own emotions, right? Everyone's very self-critical at the end of the day, but you kind of have to like watch yourself or listen, whatever the medium is, and not look at it as you, just look at it as like, oh, here's a mistake, like that needs to be fixed, and kind of see what it is. So I've learned to take longer pauses instead of saying and nobody's perfect. Even Joe Rogan still does it. It's just not nearly as frequent as when he first started.
I love that self-modeling thing. You can use that for anything, right?
Everything, yeah, not just speaking, but self-modeling is important in sports as well. When I played football in high school, we would watch our own tape, and our coach would consistently talk about this, like, you need to watch what you're doing wrong, or else you're going to continually make the same mistake over and over. And so those who find a lot of success understand that there are going to be a lot of mistakes, but you can't look at the failures as failures. You have to really be like a silver linings type person and kind of pull all of those skills out of it to grow.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to go back to what you were talking about with social media presence. Did you ever separate your, I guess, private life to your podcast, social media presence, or did you ever combine them together?
This was a big confliction when I first started, and I asked a few of my friends who were in the marketing world what the idea was. I had at Jake Gallen on everything, but then I was like, do I also do at the guest list pod for everything? Like, but if I'm a podcaster and I'm just conversations, isn't that like the same thing at the time? So everyone essentially, they recommended to do a separate account for everything, but then still channel everything through your personal account, but then do like the podcast marketing, I guess, through these other channels. And so I tried doing that for a long time, and it just didn't feel authentic to me. And so I did it for just trying different social media experiences, follow, unfollow, messaging different accounts. I learned that some guests prefer if you message them through your business account. Some people prefer your personal account. And so it took months and months to kind of figure out where my role was. And I consistently went back and forth. My biggest presence is on Twitter. And so I was always just talking about random stuff, and then I kind of specialized. And now my Twitter account's all about crypto. And then the at the guest list pod is all like my podcasting stuff. But I consistently go back and forth between these two of like, do I just talk about my podcast stuff with my crypto stuff? Do I separate Vegas? And so I've just become very like engaging with my audience. And I asked them, did a poll yesterday, so to my crypto audience. It was like, do you guys like Vegas content? Like, would you like to see more? And I did like, yes, no, whatever you want, we'll follow you. And I don't